So we're doing our year-end review roundup stories. You're here today to talk about your beat covering Ford Motor Company. And Ford has had, for as much money as they're making, it's kind of a rough year. It seems like it's been a challenging year for Ford. Of course, they came into it with Jim Farley expressing frustration at how they were executing on launches and quality.
Yeah, it really depends on what metric you're looking at it from, right? Because arguably they haven't really improved much in terms of those quality woes. They continue to lead or be near the top of the industry in terms of recalls. Warranty costs continue to hurt their quarterly results, but they are making money. And the company would argue you're really seeing the first signs of that growth plan called Ford Plus really starting to blossom. That's how they've separated the business units and are really focusing on high margin, profitable vehicles and services in each segment, whether it's internal combustion, EVs, hybrids, or on the commercial side compared to retail. So the business has improved in terms of profitability standpoint. They still have a lot of quality concerns, although in their most recent launches, including maybe the biggest one, the Super Duty F-Series larger trucks, went relatively smoothly. So that has to be a credit to them.
Okay, so doing well with the pickups and the SUVs, hybrids, Ford Pro, the commercial unit is doing well. Ford Credit is holding up against higher interest rates, but the EVs. Last quarter, I think it was $37,000 of loss per vehicle. Really, gaudy, bad numbers within that division. How do they look at that? And they see that as a sign of progress, or it's just this is the cost of the future that we have to spend now while we're making money on F-Series and Expeditions?
That's really how they're looking at it. They still promise all of us that they are going to make 8% margins on these things in the back half of the decade here. And they have a plan to get there, and they've sort of explained how they'll turn a profit on scale, on reducing battery costs, and improving design and engineering efficiencies in their next generation of products. They like to point out that the Mach-E, the Lightning, and the E-Transit are all sort of their first gen EVs in this new push at electrification, not including things like the C-Max back in the day. But there's a sense that this is their first shot. They're just learning how to do this. These vehicles are always going to be either commoditized or just not efficient enough to turn a big profit. And they're really banking on these next-gen products that are going to come from the plants in the South in Kentucky and Tennessee to really ramp up those efficiencies.
I mean, the F-150 Lightning, for me, has, it's been a lightning rod of everything that's confused and frustrated America with EVs. There was so much hype and excitement when this vehicle was launched. I mean, it was a very celebratory environment. They talked about the work truck price while showing off, the high-end technology. And the thing is, this was really a sort of, back-end engineered, stuff a bunch of batteries in a F-150 as opposed to, what they're really working on and what the industry needs, which is, products that are designed for EVs, designed to be EVs. GM already has them. The Hummer is still very high priced, but it's like they're on that cycle and starting to get to the Silverado that is a true EV. How long does Ford have to wait before they can get out there with a competitive truck?
Well, I think, again, you're talking middle of the decade. That's when what they call the T3, there's a phrase they say, trust the truck. I really hope we get an actual name soon so we can stop using that. But they call it T3. That's the next generation pickup from Ford Blue Oval City. But I think with the Lightning, again, you have to go back to this concept of maybe getting people prepared or whetting their appetite, getting them used to electrification, showing them that, hey, yeah, you can have a truck. It looks like a truck. It largely acts like a truck unless you want to tow or haul a lot. But it can do a little bit more than the average truck, right? You can power your home. You can have that frunk with all that storage space. So as long as they get people into that mindset, and whether they've succeeded or not is up for debate because a large majority of these Lightning owners are new to Ford and they're new to pickup trucks. So they're not necessarily winning over loyal F-150 gas powered buyers necessarily, but they are bringing new people into the brand. So if you can at least wrangle them in, maybe they'll take that next step.
Yeah, it's just that challenge of getting people excited about what EVs can do and then not really being able to, deliver that fully until the second half of the decade. And here we are, it's 2023 when the EV growth industry-wide has kind of stalled out. 2024 could be another sort of rough year for growth where there's all this now, piling on, oh, America's not ready for EVs, but maybe it's just the EVs aren't ready for America quite yet.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing Ford really adjust their strategy, just like a lot of companies in this industry right now, whether it's how they build batteries, who they partner with, what types of batteries they're producing, how much they're investing in the subassembly and different areas in terms of vertically integrating the entire process, how much of that they just leave to others to do versus how much they bring in-house. And you're seeing that in terms of the production of the vehicles they have today. We've seen them cut a shift at the Lightning plant. We've seen prices fluctuate on all of their products. And I think it really goes to show the still what the industry doesn't know about EVs. Because if you remember just a couple of years ago when they were launching these products, they really undercalled demand. And then they rushed to add more capacity at these plants and add additional shifts. And now all of a sudden they're cutting back. So maybe the pendulum swung the other way too far. I'm not sure.
I mean, some of the opposition, or at least healthy skepticism and questioning of the strategy, has come from their dealers who have been, it seems like, more frustrated with Ford than most brands' dealers are with their brands, with the manufacturers. Where does that stand now? They've kind of won over a lot of the dealers, but they've had to make compromises along the way.
Yeah, and that's what the company would point to and say this is sort of an evolving idea that we're trying out and we're taking your feedback. But I still don't think it's a great sign when you have most state dealer associations opposing the program, when you have multiple lawsuits or other legal actions in various states looking to shut down the program. And we've found out near the end of the year here, they've had 400 dealers drop out of the program since they announced it. So there's some issues the company needs to work through. I think there's a little distrust on the dealer side in terms of what they want to do, how they want to sell these, and the restrictions they're sort of placing on them, what they're forcing them to invest in. And then all of a sudden, hey, if that demand's not as great, well, hey, I just had to spend millions of dollars here for chargers that all of a sudden I don't need. Why should I do that if I'm a dealer?
Right. Or they put in, if they were trying to be enthusiastic partners of the manufacturer and they went and put in all the chargers, and now it's like, well, you didn't need all those. And by the way, we're changing the charging system in 2025.
Yeah, now you can just use the Tesla charger too, or now you'll need to buy adapters. So there's a lot of unknowns there, and we're going to see how this evolves in 2024 here. But I don't think it's been a great thing for Ford to have happen. But also, you could make the opposite argument and say that, in a certain sense, maybe they are taking these actions and having these conversations with their dealer network before other brands are. So maybe if they work out the kinks and smooth this all out, maybe they could be at an advantage over some other companies.
One last thing on the EV front. Ford has made plans to invest in a very large battery plant in Marshall, Michigan. This was originally kind of seen as a joint venture with CATL out of China. It's now structured really as a licensing agreement. But we just got the rules recently from the Biden administration, or we got guidance for what the rules will be on the foreign entity of concern clause in the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, that means that any vehicle that has significant componentry from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, places like that, will not qualify for federal tax credits on the sale of EVs. And yet we don't know. It seems that we still can't tell from the guidance that's been issued whether the batteries that come out of that plant will be compliant or not with the Inflation Reduction Act. What kind of headaches is this causing for Ford?
You can make the argument that Marshall's sort of been a mess for the company since they announced it early in 2023. They took that pause during the UAW negotiations. It's been a lightning rod politically for them in terms of Republicans in Washington sort of demanding answers, requesting information about the company's partnership with China. And now we see that Ford's downsizing their plans there, maybe about half of what they expected the output to be and half of what they expected the employment levels to be. So there's still a lot of questions. And again, it's just another example of sort of the changing demand, the changing dynamics around the EV industry. I'm not really sure we can confirm and say today that what they've announced will be the case when that plant finally opens, but it'll be interesting because at the best case, they want Marshall to be this example of how they're investing in new technology, bringing jobs to the country and lowering their battery costs. The types of batteries that are produced here are supposed to be significantly cheaper than what they have in their vehicles today and allow them to get to those margins. So if that's compromised in any way, you have to wonder about all the targets they've given us.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like they're sort of hedging their bets until they can figure out what the labor situation is going to be, what the regulatory situation is going to be. I mean, we do know, Ford is going to sell EVs that are priced above, the price caps, and they're going to sell EVs to people who make more money than can qualify for those EV tax credits, and maybe they can structure their portfolio in a way that minimizes the disadvantage. But to not have the clarity has got to be a real challenge when you're trying to invest billions of dollars.
Yeah, it's not great.
Not great. So Ford had very contentious talks with the UAW. I guess everybody did, but at Ford it seemed to sting a little more than across town.
Yeah, they had prided themselves on the fact that they hadn't had a strike in half a century, right? And that's out the window. They had prided themselves on the fact that they had really strong relationships with the union and its leaders. Throw that out the window. Now they're stuck with a lot higher costs moving forward that will make not only their EV plans, but quite frankly, every investment plan they have a lot more difficult to maintain. They're going to need to control costs. They're going to need to make sure that everything they're promising really pays off, because now there's just not as much wiggle room for them because they will be paying their workforce a lot more and incurring a lot more in terms of labor costs.
They're talking about $900 more per vehicle, at least by the end of the contract. That's close to the profitability of a lot of vehicles.
Sure, yeah, and it's not great. And you wonder, okay, what's the result? Will prices of vehicles go up? And yeah, maybe, but to be fair, they have been going up anyway, right? Well before, it's not a UAW thing if vehicle prices rise. But what the company needs to do, and what they've sort of alluded to, is find ways to save money in the manufacturing process and basically everywhere else. And this really brings us full circle to the point we made at the start of this segment, is that they entered 2023 with a lot of quality problems, a lot of operational inefficiencies in their system that they promised to root out. They've kind of started to do that a little bit, but not really. Like, there's issues that remain. And now they're just going to need to do that all the more in order to offset these labor costs. It's a challenge not only Ford's had, but many others have had for decades. This isn't really an efficient business in a lot of ways. And we often get in this cycle of starting to see some progress and then falling back into bad habits. Now, if Ford does that, it's just going to hurt them all the more.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on them in 2024. Michael Martinez, thank you so much for joining me for this Year in Review Talk.
Thanks, Jimmy.